is that the main runway here, it's not quite orientated properly, but that's the main northerly runway. So the American Airlines aircraft, as all of the others, would have been coming to land there and then taking off in this direction. Meanwhile, the Nighthawk would have been operating its way, Black Hawk would have been operating its way down the Potomac here. Now, as the pilot of the Black Hawk, he'd have thought all of the civilian traffic is to the north of me, leaving or arriving. What happened just before this accident, though, was the American Airlines aircraft was on approach down here, was suddenly asked, could he take the shorter runway, which is the runway here? He said he could. So therefore, rather than going straight along that line, he diverted down to the south to get himself onto a lineup for that runway there. All of that, of course, would have put him on a direct collision course. Now, that sounds awful, but the whole purpose of procedural is that they may well be crossing. In fact, the two dots on the radar would have absolutely superimposed themselves, but they should have been height deconflicted, because that way you can guarantee they'll never hit each other. Now, an airline will eventually go through 200 feet, the height at which the helicopter was, but it'll do it really close to the runway, and the helicopter should be nowhere near that. So the fact remains is that somehow this helicopter, because the collision happened at 400 feet at about 150, 160 miles an hour. The question is, what was the helicopter doing at that height? And frankly, it doesn't look very survivable, and that's why it doesn't surprise me that they've called off the search now.
Right here, but I know you wanted to hear what happened and maybe my response to how they handled this emergency and what led to it. It looks pretty clear at this point that the helicopter had accepted visual separation. That's when they make that call, when they're cleared for that. They said, yep, we've got the airplane in sight, and the airplane they had in sight was the wrong airplane. There was another one in between that and the one that they were looking at. And sadly, they ran into that aircraft.
438, ready for taxi.
Everyone's going to have to hold for down.
No.
I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. Fire Command, the accident happened in the river. Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river. It's east of the approach end of runway 33.
It's amazing to me how much clarity they have about actually what happened and where it happened. And many times in an accident like this, it takes 5 to 10 minutes just to get everything sorted out. They're very good here at getting it all very concise. And so the response time was phenomenal on this.
Is the airfield closed?
Yes, the airfield is closed. The airfield is closed.
Runways as well?
Okay, ARF is the Aircraft Rescue and Firefighters. That's the actual fire chief that's in the fire truck. He's asking, is the airport closed and are all the runways closed as well? That way he can expedite getting out there. He doesn't have to stop and ask, can I cross this runway? Can I go on that taxiway? She's about to tell him, the whole place is shut down. You go. You own the airport now.
All runways are closed. Nobody's landing. No one's moving at all.
And we have clearance across all taxiways and runways, correct?
Yes, you have clearance through the whole field, all taxiways and runways.
So basically she's saying to these guys, go. And at that moment, the fire trucks take off. What we know about the accident at this point is that there were no survivors. It's now a recovery operation. That's the sad part about all of this, and that's the part that really hits us hard.
Senator, he's along the track that every plane is along. You say, what was a helicopter doing in that track? It's very sad. But visually, somebody should have been able to see and taken that helicopter out of play, and they should have been at a different height.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned the Russians that were on board that plane. What other nationalities were on board that passenger?
There were a couple of others. We're going to be announcing it in about an hour. We have some very specific information. We're calling the countries. We've spoken to most of them, but there were some other countries represented.
Mr. President, have you spoken to President Putin?
I have not, no.
Mr. President, on your executive order,
Not about this.
on your executive order, you've already issued an executive order you say will restore aviation safety.
Right.
This crash happened after that. Was the executive order successful, and what more needs to change to keep people safe?
Well, you know, we issued it 3 days ago, and we're in the process of making those changes. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. Actually, my original order should have never been changed, and I think maybe you wouldn't have had this problem. Maybe. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We see like everyday life that very often those diversity hires cause sometimes issues, as you just mentioned. So what plan do you have? Are we going to see some fire? Are you going to fire some of those diversity hire in the federal government? What's plan do you have?
I would say the answer is yes. If we find that people aren't mentally competent, you see the language. The language is put out by them. And if you see that, I'm not going to bore you by reading it again, but these are not people that should be doing this particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs, but not people that should be doing this particular job.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the other things I will tell you is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system, and then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have. But they didn't build the systems properly. They spent a lot of money renovating a system, spending much more money than they would have spent if they bought a new system for air traffic controllers, meaning the computerized systems. There are certain companies that do a very good job. They didn't use those companies. They used companies that should not have been doing it. No, I think it's very important to understand that for some jobs, and not only this, but air traffic controllers, they have to be at the highest level of genius.